and welcome to the first episode of Shuttlerock Shifts. Shuttlerock Shifts is where we're going to dive into the shifts in marketing that are impacting marketers across digital as well as creative, and a lot more happening within the industry. My name's Scott McBride. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Shuttlerock, normally based in Singapore, but today I'm in the lovely wet city of Sydney. A little bit down under, but it's great to be here and great to be out and about meeting such fine gents that I have with me here today. So in real life, which is a great change over the last couple of years, I've got Andy Lark, who's the CEO of Group Lark, as well as the CCO of Dubber. And then it's fantastic to have with me here today, Darren Woolley, who is the CEO of Trinity P3.
Great to be here.
Yeah, good to be here, man. Thanks for having us.
Attending today. So today we're going to talk about a new report that's just coming out. It's a report obviously that Shuttlerock commissioned, but independently commissioned, worked on by Andy and Darren specifically, where we're really looking at a big question that we want to answer. How are marketers adjusting to the ever-increasing demands of digital media, digital creative, digital content, anything digital that goes on the screen? So I'm going to hand over to Darren, but I think most importantly at the beginning, it would be great if you could give us a little bit of context about Trinity P3 and the work that you do around the world.
So Trinity P3 is an independent marketing management consultancy. What that means is that we actually work with marketers and their agencies and other suppliers to really identify through qualitative and quantitative methods where the opportunities are for them to improve productivity and effectiveness. And what I mean by that is every marketer is struggling with how do they go into and manage as many channels as they need to these days on budgets that are largely static and have been static over the past decade. So how do you actually achieve that is the answer that we try and bring to that with proof.
And that's something that the research really dug into, right? Which was really looking at how do we address the cost, the complexity, and also the volume and best practice requirements that are needed. Yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Now, Darren and I go way back. I think when I first landed in Australia, I got to know Darren when I was at Combank, but we worked together at Xero and a bunch of others. And the thing that's always sort of intrigued me is when you sit with a marketer, they'll always ask you the inevitable question, like how do you justify the return on marketing investment? What you quickly discover is what they're largely talking about is how do I explain media spend and a little bit of my creative spend? And more than 50% of their budget is actually going to making marketing, not doing marketing. So that 50% is largely completely ignored. So to your point, if you've got a fixed budget and that half that goes to making marketing is under ever increasing pressure because you've got more forms of media to serve and service, you've got more campaigns to get in market, you're sort of suffering from the pressure of endless data, so you're trying to use data to do more. You've got to actually be able to make more on the same amount of money. And I think that is a radical shift that marketing needs to adjust to, because not only the volume is changing, but the type of what we need to make has to change. It's no longer just a fixed ad unit. It's a dynamic moving video image in multiple forms. And now we want it to be personalized. We want the right variant of that to touch or reach you. It's sort of exponential growth in what you've got to make on the same amount of money. You need a totally different approach to making it. And that's what I think why this piece of research, and you can snag a copy of it, obviously, I think on the Shuttlerock site, you should read it, because it really does get at this notion that exponential requirements on how you make marketing, the making bit of marketing, require a fundamentally different approach to making.
And Andy, there's some traditional sort of thinking around this that's actually stopping the industry moving forward. And that is, we talk to so many marketers that when they talk to their agencies about that challenge, they get the old quality cost time. You can have any two.
Yeah.
And the part that's missing out of that is the way technology can actually allow you to have all three, that it is easier and fast. You can be faster and cheaper without actually having to compromise quality. And that's the really exciting thing. And I think that came out in the research.
Yeah, I think that's right. When you think about this term CaaS, creative as a service, it's a riff on the normal SaaS and PaaS and everything else you hear out there. But it gets at a fundamental dynamic, right? Which is the typical marketer today, our research shows in a medium-sized business is actually using around about 20 to 28 different marketing tools. Bigger companies can be high as 40 or 50, full spectrum, right? I'm using email, Slack, I'm using Figma, I'm using this, I'm using that all day long, right? So we're actually quite accustomed to, as marketers, to using a combination of people, process, and technology in the cloud to do our work, but not in creative. Like not in creative, like why not?
Yeah, it's quite interesting in that, we look at ourselves as a technology company, right? We specialize in creative as a service. Why are marketers not adding creative technology to their technology stack, enabling them to execute using people, process, and the technology, and able to customize to meet the requirements of not just the best practice of every platform, every screen, anything from sort of a social platform to sort of digital out of home or even in store, but more importantly, to really focus on being able to execute creative that moves, creative that captivates, that's more effective, whether they're looking for upper funnel brand awareness metrics or even brand consideration or even down to, conversion, and looking at how creative technology can help enable the volume that is required to unlock return on ad spend.
I think the other interesting thing that we saw in the research is, where technologies go, business models go. If you think about, you wanted to buy CRM once, it was millions of dollars. You had a tender or an RFP. Salesforce came along, it was $99 and you bought it per user, right? Well, the way creative is fundamentally produced today is still based on a fundamentally broken model, which is I've got fixed human capacity over here and I sell that in blocked out units of creative production. So if I go back to an agency and I say, oh my God, I need another 8 formats of that ad, that falls onto the whatever price list I might have agreed with them, and they go, that equals that times this amount, as opposed to capacity being viewed as adapted and adopted using technology. So technology is doing a big chunk of the work, so it's infinitely scalable, and you're consuming a fixed capacity. So I know I'm a Shuttlerock customer. I know I spend whatever it is, $20,000, whatever period it is, I can't even remember right now, and I get an infinite amount of production in that window. When one job starts, I can start another job. That job can take 3 days end to end. I ship a base creative asset. I get, 8, 10 formats of ad back from that. And then I go, okay, what are we going to do now? Oh, we're going to do this. I don't phone my agency and go, oh my God, I've got a new brief for you. And they go, oh, okay, well, let's come back with your quote on that brief. I don't have that conversation anymore. It's, I pay once, consume up to my limit. And much like with a Salesforce or anybody else, if I exceed my limit, well, then you're going to phone me and go, okay, well, you're now on a different tier of pricing. Well, that's fine. It's predictable. That's the characteristic.
It's price certainty, basically.
It's predictable. So now I'm locked in on the efficiency of my marketing. Yeah, I mean, that's the trick. That's the shift, right? It's not just that CaaS or creative as a service is fundamentally about a new way of producing creative. It's we as an industry needed a completely new model for consuming creative services.
Yeah, and if I look at it from a financial standpoint, if you're the CFO in a medium-sized organization or a large multinational, you're looking across your financial year going, how do I drive as much price certainty as I can? How do I make sure I'm being able to deliver to the marketing department the volume they need, but knowing that I'm not going to get exponential increases in my budgets? So with that in mind, Darren, if you look at the research that you conducted and you look into the kind of the comparisons around the traditional type of models, can you sort of dive in a little bit to some of the kind of the figures that you were able to extrapolate?
Yeah, look, we were able to really segment the marketplace into the traditional ways that we've seen marketers go to market with production. So, of course, the most obvious one is that they'll go to their creative agencies. The creative agency is doing the strategy, will develop the creative, and then go into production. And it's an end-to-end solution that's rather linear and traditionally linear. Because of that, it has some limitations, as Andy was saying, that every time a job starts, it's a new process and a new project, and there's costs associated with it. Economies of scale are difficult to capture. And so what we're able to do is model that against the creative as a service. and start to look at what are the differences between the two. But we didn't just look at creative agencies, we also looked at production companies, because we have seen the rise of production companies starting to look at their existing production infrastructure and how they could drive additional revenue through providing production-only services. And so they've become competitors. They're very much, unlike the creative agency, they're very much focused on production only. They're not carrying that infrastructure of strategy and creative and the account management teams. They have producers, but their infrastructure's less. And then finally, we had the in-house teams. Yeah, because we've seen the growth of in-housing. In Australia, it's been only in the last 2 or 3 years. In the US, it's been at least a decade. The myth of in-house is that it's so much more cheaper, when in actual fact, it's only cheaper when you choose to ignore things like overhead and all of the ancillary costs. You know, they're usually only looking at direct salary costs as that comparison. But still, there's a speed to market. And so when we compared those three, running the financial models for each of those, we got some really insightful views on that. The first is that the creative agency is 3 to 4 times more expensive and can be up to 100% slower. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that's being driven by that very traditional linear approach, the inability to scale easily, the lack of realizing economies of scale. And also, I think part of it's the culture. You know, there is definitely a culture in creative agencies of in many ways being a craft shop where craftspeople sit around tinkering and trying to make it, in their minds, the best it can be. And so not necessarily looking at quality fit for purpose and being able to deliver on that. The next is production companies, and they're certainly more cost efficient and time efficient in that you're typically looking at 1.5 to 2 times more expensive, and perhaps only about 50% slower. Now, the advantage for them is they have the technology to actually produce in-house. They have production people, but it's still quite a manual process. You know, there'll still be people following the productions through. And we think that's, you know, from our research, was what was driving the increased cost and the longer delivery times. And finally is the in-house teams. Now, similarly, they were also, like production companies, running at about 1.5 to 2 times more expensive and can be slower, but not as slow as any external supplier. You know, just the physical locality inside the client's business is inclined to create a perception of delivering on time because they're just physically there. But it was really interesting how the business models are actually often getting in the way of them being able to compete to a solution that is technology-based with a very single focus of delivering high-quality productions, short turnaround times, and at the lowest cost available in the market.
If you look at, you think about the clients that you work with, the brands, the businesses, are you seeing a major push from them towards the industry, the supplying providers that necessitates a move towards a new type of model? So if we're saying creative as a service, as a platform, as an offering is the way forward, can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what the businesses are asking you?
Yeah, well, we've been tracking scopes of work since 2004. In 2004, 2005, the average brand would produce around 200 to 250 pieces of work per brand per year. What I mean by that is social media updates, videos, everything, but there'd be 200 to 250. In 2019, the average brand was producing 2,500 plus. We've seen an exponential growth in the volume of work being done by brands. And so marketers are struggling because how do you get that volume from a supplier that's not able to deliver economies of scale? So what we have been seeing prior to creative as a service being really considered is marketers would often go to, for instance, a cheaper, lower quality agency, or they may go to a production company. They were looking for any solution that would give them an ability to be able to deliver these huge volumes for less cost so that they could reinvest that back into other areas of their marketing. I think that means that a technology solution that gives them certainty around cost and the ability to scale and delivers on those timelines has to be a winner and would certainly be part of the consideration of the mix. It will take a cultural change from our perspective of marketers to stop thinking of their advertising process as an end-to-end and start thinking of the first part is the strategy and the creation, and then the second part is actually the implementation, and the two can actually be separated. This has been very common in the UK with what they call decoupling, but we need to see that in other markets. And currently, I think they're often dissuaded from even considering that by agencies looking at trying to protect their revenue source. Because we have to remember, for a lot of agencies, their major source of revenue is in implementation, not in the real value that they offer around strategic and creative thinking in the first place.
Yeah, the additional margin sits in the production piece to then make the creative ideation maybe more valuable to them sort of along the way as well. And if I look at internally what we're specifically seeing, I think you're very correct and insightful in terms of the volume of assets is increasing exponentially. If I go back 5 years, we might be doing toolkits of 50 to 75 assets. We're now producing toolkits that could be 200 to 250 that get localized in every single market around the world. What I've noticed, and Andy, I'd love to kind of pass this one to you to kind of get your thoughts with your CMO hat on, is that the complexity of the actual asset itself is getting far more in depth. It's video based, it's 3D. There could be augmented reality elements to that as well. And that, coupled with the fact that the people producing these assets need to be incredibly well versed in the nuances between a TikTok, a Meta, an Instagram, Google, and every other type of screen. So I'm presuming this keeps you up at night worrying, but I have a funny feeling you might have a solution.
I mean, the central thing that keeps me up at night is I know that with Shuttlerock, a combination of Shuttlerock, an in-house team, a bunch of smart marketers, I can output stuff. The question is, can I output stuff worthy of attention? And can I output stuff to the formats required to meet customers where they are? If I want to do YouTube, I have to do video. If I want to do TikTok, I got to do video. I got no choice. I have to do video. And boy, are we ready for that. Now, I can churn out plenty of static display ads, but can I do video at the right quality, the right intensity? That's a whole different thing. So for a medium-sized business to try and do that, you've got no choice but to go to creative as a service with someone like Shuttlerock. You simply can't afford to phone 1-800 your favorite agency and hope that they're going to do that at a reasonable price point for you. Because the fundamental shift here that we're all struggling with is the accessibility now of media at scale. I look at just my typical consumption across the day. I'm on and off media sort of 4 to 6 hours of the day looking at different things. Man, if I can't meet you there with attention-worthy, craveable content, I'm going to lose. And that's the battle. And the trick is, I've found, at least, is agencies are fantastic at doing that big upfront hairy idea that you need to crack TV, let's say. But the expertise to translate that into a multitude of digital formats that are compliant in 48 hours, that's not going to happen. It's just simply not going to happen. And the other thing that's happened that compounds this for those of us who have run large in-house capabilities is just your access to talent. You go, okay, we'll hire some more creative people or more designers or more animation designers. Good luck, because they cost as much as developers now.
Yeah.
So you just can't access the people you need to do it. So you've got to have a different way of doing this. You've got to come up with a new way of doing it.
So you would then argue the marketplace is now rather broader in terms of the scale of different providers. And, like agencies play a phenomenal role within the industry and the big ideas piece and the complex media planning and the buying side of which, Darren, I know you get involved in. I'd be really interested to just sort of, Darren, pick your brains a little bit on what you think the kind of the key message and outtake from this is going to be for the likes of our procurement and purchasing friends.
Well, look, purchasing a procurement, a lot of people point the finger to them and say they're the ones cutting the cost. But in actual fact, they're working with marketers to help the marketer solve this problem, which is how do I do everything I need to do with a limited budget? And procurement is starting to look at this whole approach as a way of how can we drive increased productivity? How can we drive economy of scale? They're looking for these solutions, but they're also looking to their marketing colleagues to help them define things like quality and projecting forward as to, what will be the requirements of the future. Procurement are not about solving a problem today. They're very much focused on longer term. So they're looking for, as you mentioned earlier, predictability of cost, certainty of supply chain, the ability to be able to consistently deliver the requirements of their marketing team, which in some ways is their internal client, so that the marketers are able to do more with what they have. And I think most procurement people, and especially marketing procurement people, would be very open to any solution that can promise that and deliver that.
You landed on something really interesting that I wanted to pick up on, is this idea of historically having to compromise, right? I fully believe that we should be able to execute the creative that we need and create without compromise. And Andy, when you put your CMO hat on, you think about Dubber, you think about the volume and the bespoke nature of what it is that you're acquiring. You're not really buying units, you're not buying assets, you're buying production capacity, right?
Yeah, the way I look at it is, without sort of boring people too much with the granularity of a CaaS solution, right? But for me, I'm buying a combination of people, process, and technology. That's always my lens, is people, process, technology. And I sort of look at it and go, is there someone to call? Can I have a conversation with an adult about what I need done and why I need it done in 4 hours' time? Yes, I can. Great. Awesome. But also, can I quickly go in and see all my assets? Can I share those assets across teams globally? Can I say to someone in the US who goes, oh my God, I got this really great buy that I've just come up with this magazine and I need to ship this display unit format or, whatever I need to ship. Yeah, just lock on to Shuttlerock and there it is. It's done. So I think it's this idea that it's a engine for improving the performance of marketing, right? CaaS, I think Darren made a really good point earlier that the thing that we constantly looked at in this research was this trade-off marketers get forced to make around quality, cost, and time. And they actually we as marketers make that ourselves, but you don't need to. I literally sat on the plane this morning flying up here to Sydney. We've got an interesting opportunity with not really a direct competitor, but one of the big players in the industry is a bit financially challenged at the moment, so we can take a stab at them. And I literally sketched out the ad on my iPad. Said, here's the ad. Use this from before, add in this, do this. Can I have it back by 4 p.m.? Yep, done. Goes into the Shuttlerock machine. It's dead easy for them to do. Spits it back out. It's all compliant. It's ready to go. Now, I could have done that with my in-house team, but they're working on 1,000 other things. Shuttlerock has infinite capacity. My in-house team has fixed capacity. And I think this is the trick here, is this trade-off between quality, cost, and time. You don't need to make it, these solutions. And in fact, most agencies should be using this as well, right? They actually should be using this and delivering it to me as a white labeled service. That would be awesome as well. But the other challenge too, I think, that's getting really interesting in the market today, and love to hear Darren's view on this. And agency people hate hearing this more than anything else. It is very, very hard to find an agency. It is not easy. It is God's work to find an agency to work with that really wants to lean in, step up, get involved. It's different if you a CommBank or NAB and you pick up the phone and go, would you like to work on our account? Oh my God, share. The flow of money starts like going through your head and you're like, oh, this is going to be awesome. But if you're a medium-sized business and you phone up and you go, oh, hi, I'm from Dubber, I'm really looking for a creative agency. Yeah, we're kind of busy for the next 12 weeks. Maybe we could have lunch in December. You're like, was your phone 1-800-SHUTTLEROCK? It's like, okay, we get ready to go tomorrow morning.
But to be fair, you, just for full disclosure to everybody that's listening, you still do use creative resources, there's a certain place for
absolutely. We use them to give us the ideas. I think it goes back to Darren's point. We use them for where they're strongest. ideas, strategy, thinking, and maybe some of the big stuff we need done, we don't use them for where we need economy of scale.
Yes, exactly.
And that's where we've been using a metaphor for quite a number of years with our clients, where we say to them, you think of the automotive industry. You know, the automotive industry spends a lot of time researching and investing in building a prototype for the next model. Now, think of that as your brand strategy and your brand execution at that high level. But then when they've got the right solution, the next thing they do is develop a very efficient and flexible and responsive production line that will deliver all of the versions you want. Do you want red Juco with blue upholstery or whatever? And it will just churn through. There's no compromise on quality, but what they're doing is minimizing the price by getting the economies of scale of being able to produce that in real time. You know, if the automotive industry made a prototype for every client, no one would be able to afford a car.
Exactly.
It's the production line mentality and approach, the philosophy that's really driven that. And it's been resisted by the industry for a long time because there's this belief it has to be end to end. No, let the agencies and let the experts in creativity and strategy really work on getting that right. But when it comes to implementation in a world where there's only ever going to be more and more demand for volume, and we can't compromise on quality because the consumer will not forgive us. And we have to be responsive, so it's shorter time. So this is why agencies have got to stop talking about quality, cost, and time. You can have any two because you can't. In the world today, it's all three or you're not in the game.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic example. And, you know, it's ironic in that over the last couple of years, I've been using the car assembly line as an example where you have people, process and technology to make sure that that car comes out the same absolutely every time, because to your point, the consumer doesn't want to compromise. They want to pay a certain amount of money, but most importantly, they can't afford to buy a Bugatti every single time. So it can't be handmade and built and crafted and things like that. So on that note, if we were to think about a message, Darren, you would want to maybe say to marketers out there, you know, what to do next, what to consider, you know, if they're thinking about their technology stack, whether creative technologies in it or their overall kind of roster of partners, what would be the key things you would say?
I find that most marketers are very, very focused and spend a lot of their time and effort on delivering and developing and delivering their strategy and their marketing plan. But in a world where they're increasingly having to compromise because of budget restrictions, and Andy, I don't think I've ever met a marketer that said they've got enough budget. Have you?
Ever.
No. So you know, any marketer that's finding themselves stressed, step back or hand it to procurement or someone in your organization to step back and start to rethink your go-to-market. Who are the partners you need? How are you going to do this to meet the needs that you have today and in the future? Because doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome is insanity, and it just won't cut it anymore.
So if we were to give it a sort of term, would we call it a go-to-market partner strategy versus saying, I need X number of assets, I need Y amount of creative resource, I need media at X price?
Yeah, just question everything and rethink the traditional paradigms, the traditional methodologies, and look for what's available because there's so much available. This idea of going to a cheaper and cheaper agency or production house is not the solution. There are better solutions available to you.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of, you know, chatter in the industry over the last couple of years for sure, where everybody's saying it's a race to the bottom line. There's not enough margin in it. And I think to what you're saying, it's a case of we shouldn't expect cheaper. We should expect new and different ways to execute the volume of requirements that are actually required. And then, Andy, if we think about, you know, you and the various businesses that you're involved in, what would be your sort of key takeouts and sort of learnings that you could pass on to the listeners?
I think I'd come back to this sort of core idea that if you fundamentally believe as a marketer, which you should, that it starts with brand, then fundamentally you're also buying into the idea that it starts with attention, earning attention for that brand. the notion of digital in particular being this sort of random afterthought where you put your logo down the bottom, you use the right font in the middle, you make the background blue, the font yellow, we're done with our digital display campaign, and maybe you slap a photo in the background. Those days are over. Digital that moves is the direction that digital is shifting in, and you need a far more sophisticated, smart capability to express the brand at scale. And to Darren's point, you've got to really look at the marketing production engine, the supply chain end to end, and go, is this really coupled correctly? And don't jump to the obvious industry conversation around, we could build an in-house agency. We could, the economics of in-house agencies, I've run 2 very, very large ones now in my career. They're not that much better than the agency. It's, to Darren's point, it's more that you can walk downstairs and go, everyone stop, do this. That's the advantage of it. But, beyond that, there's not that economic advantage. The answer is in technology. The answer is in the cloud. And the answer is going, how do I use technology to start dramatically automating that supply chain and transform the way my content goes to market? Because the spectrum of media you're going to need to meet in the market is only going to grow exponentially. And if you're not geared up for that, you simply aren't going to be able to earn attention.
Yeah, because really it is a game of efficiency, right? Like where can I drive efficiency? Where can I scale? Where can I optimize elements within that process that allow me to then execute what's needed?
We prefer productivity than efficiency, because efficiency says there'll be savings which someone will pocket, whereas productivity for marketers is much more powerful because it's about producing more for the budget that you've already got.
Sort of links back to my idea of create without compromise, right? So am I able to get everything that I need? And to do that, I need to be productive.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's smashing. So just as we take a little step back and we look at, maybe the helicopter view, I'd love to kind of get sort of one key thought or one big shift that you're seeing in the industry from each of you. Darren, how about you? It's a big one. Everyone's
struggling with how to integrate data into their marketing. But they've just got to get over it. I mean, it's here. It's available for most marketers. They've really got to start putting it at the center or at the start of the whole process, because we know more about the marketplace and our customers than ever before. I just really struggle with why it ends up getting discarded or why the insights are overlooked. Because if you get the start right, if you get your strategy on the money, then everything else just flows from it. Ultimately, marketing is about driving growth and driving behavioral change. Use the knowledge to get it right. So would you say more data informed, less data worried? Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Good line. Thank you very much. I might copyright that one. Andy, your thoughts?
Oh, look, there are so many shifts going on there right now, but I think, one I would pull out that I wake up dealing with every day is what I call the downscaling of marketing. So I work with a lot of medium-sized businesses. Getting access to quality marketing capability outside the people you're able to hire is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult to find partners, whether they're agencies. It's incredibly hard to understand the media landscape. Every agency is built for a unit of big scale. They want that one big client and then 3 or 4 other medium clients and we're done. And I think we face right now an immense resource crisis in bringing the talent back into marketing, getting people energized about marketing, the real true marketing, building brands and managing brand portfolios and products, and cutting through all the nonsense we hear and actually getting back to the core of marketing, because they're sort of dumbing down or downscaling of marketing because you can't scale up at the moment. So that's why I get really excited about CaaS as an idea, this creative as a service as an idea, because the real talent and the real quality of work you demand as a medium-sized brand, you just can't get access to the resources to do it. It's very, very hard. So that'd be one big trend. I think the other big trend that I talk a lot about is the return of common sense and the shift to and return to common sense. I mean, we've been through a decade of bullshit on brand purpose and all that nonsense just made me ill. Finally, thanks to a lot of good work by people like Darren, by Mark Ritson, by Byron Sharp, by people who actually have brains, I think we're getting a bit more common sense back into marketing, and people people are becoming much more centered. And I give a lot of credit to the brands that have made, you look at the great consumer brands that Shuttlerock's work with, people like Kiehl's and people like that. These brands get branding. They've never been out of the market on building their brand. Brands like CommBank have never been out of the market. Yet every other bank in Australia seems to think they can pop in and out of the market like it's a vacation rental. It doesn't work that way. So the other big shift, I think, is a return to common sense, but that common sense is going to run head first into this new media dynamic. And you're going to need to change the way you produce creative when you get there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll add one big shift that I'm seeing, which is really the last lever, or I firmly believe the last lever that marketers have in order to optimize and drive performance is really creative. We're seeing a massive loss of data signals from platforms with the iOS changes, the app tracking transparency. And creative, if you have the right amount of volume at your disposal, you can test and learn a lot. You can drive a lot of insights. Those insights can then be repurposed. You can use them for the next campaign. And it's this idea, to steal your word, Darren, of, really using insights and data to drive greater productivity in future.
Spot on.
Yeah.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Big thank you to Andy and Darren for coming out on such a wet Sydney day. It's been a fantastic chat. And to everybody listening, we've got quite a number of additional episodes coming up in future weeks and months. Please feel free to register and download the white paper, beautifully crafted by Group Lark and by Trinity P3. And stay tuned and don't miss the next episode of Shuttlerock Shifts.